This might be the most unique film in my commentary career, and also one of the hardest to explain. Because the entire movie has no dialogue, it relied solely on its beautiful imagery to win the Best Artistic Contribution Award at the Tokyo International Film Festival that year, and scored a high 8.2 on a certain review platform. The story takes place during the years of the Cold War confrontation, where the crazy arms race pushed nuclear testing to the extreme. For 40 years, from 1949 to 1989, the Soviet Union secretly conducted over 300 nuclear tests deep within the vast Kazakh steppes. However, this grassland was not an uninhabited wilderness. 700,000 Kazakh herdsmen lived and multiplied there for generations. Yet, completely unaware, they became the most innocent victims of the military game between major powers. A retired old pilot lived in this wilderness. He lived in a dilapidated cabin, drove a rundown car, and kept a docile sheep. One day, a familiar engine sound suddenly echoed, and he immediately put down his work to go greet them. The plane was filled with old friends who had come to deliver supplies to him. Whenever this happened, he would put on his old military uniform and sit in the cockpit of the plane to thoroughly enjoy the thrill. The man had a lovely daughter who would shyly hide to the side every time, quietly watching her father soar through the air. Life in the wilderness was very difficult. Every night, the father had to use the car engine to generate electricity, and the only radio in the house was the father and daughter's sole form of entertainment. The father would sometimes go out for work, and before leaving, the daughter would carefully prepare his rations. He would use the road in front of their house to teach the girl how to drive, which was one of the few joys in her otherwise dull life. Not far from their home was a three-way intersection where she would get out of the car. Her father wasn't worried about her walking back alone because there was a boy waiting for her there, who would ride his horse to take the girl home. We will temporarily call him Little Horse. Little Horse's family lived nearby, and he and the girl were childhood sweethearts, sharing a pure and innocent affection. However, this peaceful life was soon shattered by the arrival of another boy. One day, the girl unexpectedly noticed that an out-of-town car had broken down not far away. Then, a curly-haired boy walked over to their house, wanting to get some water to drink. The shy and timid girl hid in the house, afraid to show herself. Seeing no response, the boy decided to fetch the water himself, but there was a lock on the well cover that he just couldn't open. Seeing the boy helpless before the well, the girl, after some inner struggle, chose to step out and help him. To express his gratitude, the boy took out his camera and quietly captured the girl's simple and touching appearance, his eyes full of unconcealed infatuation. That night, he secretly invited the girl outside and used an old-fashioned hand-cranked projector to display her photo on the wall. He even sealed the photo and gave it to her as a gift. Young love quietly blossomed between the two, and from that day on, the girl often thought of this boy from a foreign land. The father was very puzzled seeing his daughter acting so distracted, but he didn't say much. Afterward, things continued as usual, with the daughter driving her father to the intersection. But today, the girl was surprised to find the curly-haired boy secretly hiding in the back of the truck. However, he didn't get off with the girl, but instead rode in her father's car back to the city. When parting, their eyes were full of reluctance to say goodbye. Even though they hadn't exchanged a single word, their budding love was already overflowing from the screen. As soon as the curly-haired boy left, Little Horse hurried over, coming to take the girl home, as he always did. But the girl had actually fallen in love with curly hair, and faced with Little Horse's outstretched hand, she hesitated for the first time before eventually getting on. This relationship seemed about to turn into an intriguing love triangle, presenting the beautiful dilemmas of adolescence. However, accidents always strike unexpectedly. Due to the Soviet Union's constant nuclear testing in the vicinity, the father's health deteriorated day by day. One day, as soon as he returned home, he collapsed at the doorstep. The girl had no other choice but to help him into bed to rest. Little did she know that one night soon after, a large group of heavily armed soldiers suddenly burst into their cabin. Without a word of explanation, they detained the father on the spot and used a radiation detector to scan his entire body. They even made him strip naked and stand in the pouring rain. The girl was completely terrified by this scene, hiding under her quilt trembling. The radiation levels on her father's body severely exceeded safe limits, making it apparent that he was beyond medical help. The group of men soon swaggered away, leaving the poor old pilot there to die. Seeing her father's condition worsening, the girl picked up a hunting rifle and fired a shot into the sky, which was her way of contacting Little Horse. Little Horse quickly arrived, and seeing the dying old man in bed, he immediately realized what was happening. He brought over a military doctor from the nearby army base, but the medical facilities here were far too primitive. Combined with the years of accumulated radiation, the illness had already penetrated deep into his bones. The doctor had no effective treatment and could only send him to a hospital for palliative care. After her father left, only the girl and Little Horse remained in the house, and the romantic tension grew thicker. Just as Little Horse was about to confess his love, he was interrupted by the arriving curly-haired boy. Rivals in love see red when they meet, and the two immediately got into a fistfight. Seeing the conflict escalating, the girl simply threw a basin of cold water over them, thoroughly quelling the dispute. Not long after, the gravely ill father suddenly returned home. On the surface, he seemed to have recovered his health, but only he knew that his end was near. He held his daughter tightly, saying his final goodbyes. With her help, he bathed, changed into a neat suit, and then sat alone under a dead tree to await his final moments. As the morning sun broke through the dawn in the silent woods, the weather-beaten old man passed away peacefully, concluding his ordinary yet tragic life. When the girl brought the prepared breakfast to her father as usual, she looked at his cold body, but her grief was not as overwhelming as expected. She simply buried that day's breakfast along with her father. Now completely alone, the girl no longer had the motivation to continue living in this wilderness. So, she packed her bags, ready to go out and see the outside world. Unexpectedly, when she drove to that familiar three-way intersection, the gas tank ran empty. But the girl didn't give up. Even if she had to walk, she was determined to walk out of this wasteland. However, what awaited her was an endless electric fence. Because of the nuclear tests, the area had been completely sealed off, and the herdsmen on the plains had unknowingly become sacrificial victims. With nowhere else to go, the girl could only turn back the way she came, only to find, upon arriving home, that someone was already waiting for her. It turned out to be Little Horse's family coming to propose marriage. Little Horse personally placed a necklace symbolizing love around her neck, and the girl did not refuse. However, when Little Horse rode his motorcycle over the next day to pick up his bride, he found that the girl had already cut her long hair and was with the curly-haired boy. Little Horse revved his engine, signaling Curly Hair to get on so they could settle the matter like men. At first, Curly Hair didn't realize the severity of the situation, thinking it would just be another fistfight like before. To his surprise, Little Horse didn't play by the rules and drove his motorcycle straight at him. Knowing he couldn't dodge, Curly Hair simply closed his eyes and gave up resisting. But Little Horse was just an innocent herdsman youth. His inner purity and kindness wouldn't allow him to commit such an act. He left Curly Hair all alone in the wilderness and rode away, which also signified that he was letting go of this relationship. Curly Hair walked alone toward the girl's house. Although unbearably thirsty and exhausted, his heart was still filled with joy. Eventually, due to physical exhaustion, he collapsed on a rainy night. The girl rescued him and brought him back to the cabin, and that night, the two consummated their relationship. Early the next morning, the rain cleared up, and everything seemed to be heading in a positive direction as the girl also found a reason to stay. However, just as the two were sitting under a tree professing their love for each other, flames suddenly erupted into the sky not far away. Without any warning, a Soviet test nuclear bomb exploded right next to them. Those old rundown trucks were instantly destroyed, and Little Horse roared in agony as he charged toward the center of the explosion. At this moment, Curly Hair and the girl expressionlessly held each other's hands, calmly facing the inescapable end of the world. Test is a film directed by Alexander Kot, released in 2014. The Hollywood Reporter called the movie a, quote, breathtaking visual poem. Some film critics have said it is one of the most beautiful films they have ever seen, noting that, without dialogue, the characters touch their emotions in an indescribable way. The story is set in 1949 near Semipalatinsk, Kazakhstan. The Soviet Union's first nuclear test was officially and secretly completed on that land that very year. Over the following 40 years, the Soviet Union conducted over 400 to 500 nuclear tests there, while the 700,000 Kazakh herdsmen living on these grasslands were never informed of anything. This background is not just a historical footnote, it is the true theme of the film. Why make a film with no dialogue to tell this piece of history? Because those 700,000 herdsmen were kept in silence for 40 years, just like the silence in the movie. It wasn't that they chose not to speak, but rather that no one told them the truth. Nuclear tests were being conducted right under their feet, and radiation seeped into their bodies, their flocks, and their water sources without their knowledge. They didn't even know what they were experiencing. Therefore, a silent movie is the most fitting response to this period of history. The deepest harm inflicted by power upon ordinary people is not violence, but the deprivation of their right to know the truth. Silence is sometimes not a choice, but rather an imposed shackle. Toward the end of the film, soldiers broke into the house, scanned the father with instruments, found his radiation levels exceeded the limit, and then swaggered away, leaving him there to die. They said absolutely nothing. There was no compensation, no explanation, and certainly no apology. That kind of silence is more suffocating than any violence. Every frame of the Kazakh steppe is a double-edged sword. It is vast, magnificent, and boundless, resembling the purest freedom humanity could ever encounter on this planet. Yet, it is also a cage with no means of escape. Visually, there is the horizon, but beyond that horizon lies an electric fence. At the end of the film, the girl packs her bags, wanting to walk out of this wilderness and see the outside world. She walks until she is completely exhausted, and then she encounters the electric fence of the nuclear test exclusion zone, a fence she was never told existed. At that moment, the full weight of the movie comes crashing down. She isn't trapped by others. She is trapped for life by a secret she was never allowed to know. The more beautiful the grassland, the more cruel that electric fence becomes, because that beauty misleads people into thinking it is a place where they can truly exist in freedom. The film uses a full 96 minutes of silence to state one thing. The people on that grassland were never participants in history, but rather the cost of it. Their love triangle, their youthful innocence, and their father's entire life meant nothing on the chessboard of the great powers game. However, within the lens of this film, they are absolutely everything. Historical documents record the bomb, but this movie records those hands holding tightly onto each other. This is the significance of such films, existence, to allow those forgotten by history to be seen by us once again. Alright, that concludes today's commentary. If you enjoyed it, remember to follow, like, and comment. That's all for now. See you next time.